NHL Trade Deadline has come and gone, as has Flyers GM Danny Briere's post-deadline press conference. Joining me now on the Xfinity Mobile call-in line, it is Charlie O'Connor, Philly's #1 hockey beat writer, to tell us all things trade deadline and maybe shed some light on why Rasmus Ristolainen wasn't moved. Chuck, before we get into all the Risto stuff, what did Danny have to say about the other moves made today? The Jiricek for Brink move, trading Deslauries, etc.
Yeah, well, the Jiricek Brink trade was obviously the big trade. You know, maybe the big news is that Rasmus Ristolainen is still a Flyer. Trade was the Jiricek Brink deal. Basically, what Danny Briere said is what we all suspected. The reason why Bobby Brink was traded is because of the winger logjam. The one interesting little tidbit that came out of that is that he very much named Trevor Zegras as a winger. He was asked about that later on in the presser, and he more or less said, look, we know he can play center, but he's delivered his best work this year at wing. So without saying it, they're viewing Trevor Zegras as a winger. I got news for you. But with Brink, they just saw too many wingers. And apparently Minnesota came with a David Jiricek offer yesterday. They stewed on it for a bit, and then they eventually went with it this morning. They really like Jiricek. And I thought it was interesting that the comparison they made, which is one that we made on the show earlier today, Jamie Drysdale. He specifically said, we believe that the same way that Jamie Drysdale was probably rushed to the NHL, that probably messed up his development. We believe something similar about Jiricek. We think that we can kind of recalibrate him and get him back on track to being a legitimate top-four defenseman. I asked what his thoughts were on Jiricek's ceiling, you know, whether the post-draft struggles, especially over the last couple of years, have lowered that ceiling. And Briere said, look, like, I don't want to put a ceiling on the guy. Obviously, he hasn't been what it was expected of him after being taken 6th overall yet, but the ceiling is still sky high, and we're going to do our best to try to get him as close to that as possible. So if we're talking about the Jiricek trade, yeah, they're very high on the kid. The one interesting tidbit, and we can get into this a little bit when we talk about Ristolainen as well, he said that the plan right now is not to put Jiricek directly in the NHL. He's going to stay in the AHL for now. They do think that there's a decent chance he'll get some games in the NHL this season, but really the focus is getting him as ready as possible and as back on the right developmental path as possible heading into next year's training camp, when he's going to make, as they hope, a real push to make this team out of camp. So it seems like the rest of this year, mostly AHL, maybe some NHL time, with the goal of having him improve and get back on an upward trajectory and set him up to make a real run at a roster spot for next season.
All right, in terms of you move out, you're able to move out Brink to clear that wing log jam. You also move out Nick Deslauries. We saw Kevin Kerr's tweet earlier today. He expected Alex Bump to be called up pretty soon. Was Briere asked about that?
Yeah, Briere straight up said that that Bump is going to be seen in Philadelphia in the near future. Said some of that depends upon Konechny's recovery. Obviously, Travis Konechny is battling an injury. He practiced today, but he was wearing a non-contact jersey. Apparently, I wasn't here to see it, but the beats who were reported that. So some of it depends on that. But it does seem like Alex Bump is going to be called up very soon, and we should get to see him in Philly in the near future. He should be making his NHL debut in the next few games, if not as soon as tomorrow.
All right, Massimo Rizzo and Alexa. No, I'm kidding. Not much to really report on there. The AHL swap and the Deslauries trade are what they kind of are. The big news that came out of today was a trade that did not happen. Rasmus Ristolainen remains a Philadelphia Flyer, at least for the final 21 games of this season. I am sure this was basically all that was asked at the press conference. Why is he still here? What were the offers? What can you tell us about why Rasmus Ristolainen was not traded after all of the smoke leading up to this deadline?
Well, Briere basically kicked off his answer by saying that he felt like there was too much smoke around Ristolainen, and that he felt like the media kind of took this and ran with it. He said, absolutely, we took offers, and we made it clear that if you meet our ask, we will trade Rasmus Ristolainen. We are not, he's not untouchable. He's very much available. But he wanted to make it clear that he felt like the media maybe blew this a little bit out of proportion in terms of the likelihood of him getting moved. It really just seems like the Flyers looked at it as, we don't have to move this guy. We are going to have a high ask, and if you meet it, we will trade him. And if you don't meet it, we are not going to trade him. Now, my view of the Ristolainen situation is, I would have had more urgency to move him here. Number one, because of the strong play in the Olympics, but even more than that, I just really worry about the injury. I really worry about his injury history. I worry that if you try to play him these final 21 games, he's going to get hurt. And then maybe the Flyers, and I think they do, read between the lines of what Danny said today, I think the Flyers have designs on moving him this summer. I think that is probably the plan, especially when he mentioned about, well, we're shooting for Jiricek to make the team out of camp next year. I asked him about there being a logjam. He's like, well, we figure out ways to resolve log jams like we did with the Bobby Brink deal if we have to. I just think that there's a situation here where they're planning to, they're expecting to probably move him this summer. I just worry, like, can he make it through 21 games without getting hurt again? And it's possible he certainly could. It's just, he's been injured the last 2 years. He's had surgery 2 straight years. What happens if he has to get another surgery before the end of the season, and then all off season it's like, well, we can't trade him. He's coming off his 3rd surgery in 3 years. That's why I would have had more urgency to move Ristolainen. It doesn't seem like Briere feels that same urgency, and that's more or less what he expressed, was that, if somebody would have met our offer, we would have, or asked, we would have traded him, but nobody did, so we didn't.
I saw you tweet, Charlie, that Briere basically said, I'm not going to tell you what the offers actually were. He wouldn't divulge whether there was a first. But do we have confirmation on what the ask was? There were reports. We've kind of guessed a little bit. A first, a mid-round pick, and a prospect. Is it just simply he's unbending in that? Or do you think maybe there were some comparable offers and Danny was like, no, this is my position?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really haven't had time to pull on sources. I basically been running around since since 2 p.m. and jumped right on here. So I don't have any new information for you aside from what Danny Briere has told us on the record. What I can tell you, and I reported this in my article this morning, is that what I heard from a source out of Buffalo is that the ask of Buffalo last night was a 1st-round pick, a quality prospect, and a mid-round pick. I found out about maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes ago, that mid-round pick ask was a 3rd-round pick. So we are talking about a significant ask, 1st, 3rd, and a prospect. I don't know if Danny Briere came down from that ask. Maybe that's your, if I had to guess, and this is just a guess, but if I had to guess, I would say that the 1st-round pick was probably the line in the sand. If somebody would have offered, a 1st and a 5th, or a 1st and a prospect but no mid-round pick, then maybe they're in the realm of negotiating. But I don't think he was doing a deal without a 1st-round pick. That's why I asked him specifically, did anybody offer you a 1st-round pick? And he would not answer. His only answer was, no one was willing to offer us what we essentially would have needed to get in order to make this deal. Obviously, I'll do more digging on that over the next few hours to see if I can find out if, say, Detroit, because Detroit gave up a 1st and a 3rd for Justin Faulk, like, was that on the table for Risto and Danny just said no, and then they went with Faulk? Or did Detroit never go over a 2nd-round pick and they just liked Faulk more? I don't know. I'm going to try to find out. Right now, though, all we know is that Danny set a price. I know what the price was as recently as last night. I don't know if it came down, but Danny set that price. Nobody met his price, whatever it was in the lead up to the deadline, and Rasmus Ristolainen, as a result, is still here.
Well, whether it's at the draft, as he was acquired in a draft day trade from Buffalo, or later this summer, if he gets this done, my disappointment will dissipate. But still, it just feels like a blown opportunity today to open up a spot on the right side of this D and move on from a player who is not a part of this team's future and get a decent return for it. We will see how the rest of we'll see how this wraps up, whether he is moved, he's in camp, what have you, as the summer moves along. But as of March 6th, it's just kind of a bummer. Anything else come out of this press availability from Danny Briere after today's deadline?
There were some tidbits here and there. I already mentioned the Zegras tidbit about, seems like they very much do see him as a winger. He confirmed my report on Deslauries that basically a lot of this was essentially done to do him a solid. You know, he talked about how important of a veteran he is, you know, what he's done for this organization in his 3 2/3 seasons with the team. You know, if he wanted to join a team and have a chance at a cup, they were going to do their best to make that happen for him. That's what they did with Carolina. Already mentioned about Denver Barkey. He's going to be sent down to the AHL in a paper transaction, but then he comes back up. So he will be eligible for the AHL playoffs. I guess we'll see if they actually play him in the AHL playoffs or if they just tell him after the season, hey, good job, kid, go get some rest and then work out and come in strong next year. But they at least have the option now to play Denver Barkey in the AHL playoffs for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms because they did send both him and Adam Yinning down in a paper transaction today.
All right, and I think that pretty much covers everything from Danny Briere's post-deadline press conference. Thank you very much to Charlie O'Connor, who was here for the live show, went to the Flyers training center, covered it all, and now is joining us again here on the Shootout. That will do it for us. Thanks to Chuck on the Xfinity Mobile call-in line. And thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Follow us right here on the PHLY Sports YouTube page. Follow us on Twitter. Follow the podcast, all that stuff. Till next time, I'm Bill Matz. That is Charlie O'Connor. Be excellent to each other.